Hello, sir.
Hello, Ankit.
Sir, Mr. Adani is yet again under scanner. He's been, and this time by a foreign investigative agency of the United States. And he's been under the scanner since the last 1.5 to 2 years, first by the Hindenburg report and then some other things. So my first question to you is Mr. Adani guilty of corruption, bribing?
No, unless a court investigates and after a trial determines, we cannot come to a determination. But from what we know about Indian economy and Indian politics and our political economy, I'll be very surprised if entrepreneurs are not paying money to politicians and bureaucrats to get things done. Because corruption has now become endemic in the country. Even if a politician personally is incorruptible, in other words, he is not making money for himself, institutionally, you're surviving on corruption. Everybody knows the kind of money that is spent in elections. How can you spend 30 or 40 crores for an assembly election on behalf of a major party without corruption?
Right.
So the whole political system is now founded on rent-seeking and corruption, unfortunately. And therefore, that Mr. Adani or somebody else is forced to give money for getting the projects through or getting the agreements with the government through should not be a source of great surprise to us.
Right.
But I cannot say for sure there is guilt there until a court establishes it. But we all know what is happening in India. In contracts, typically 10% money is taken at various levels, sometimes even more money. And in power purchase agreements or some long-term contracts of this kind, again, money changes hands. In this case, for instance, what is the allegation in respect of Andhra Pradesh? Some 7,000 megawatts of power. Purchase agreement was there, solar power purchase agreement. Now, if you do a calculation, I believe initially their bid was 2 rupees 90 paise per unit. Finally, they agreed to sell at 2 rupees 40 something. Whereas around the same time, there are other investors, other projects which came up with the price of 1 rupee 99 or 2 rupees. That means at least a 40 paise difference per unit. A simple calculation of 7,000 megawatts of power, assuming about 6 hours per day average production of solar power, because only when the sun is there you get the power. It is a difference of about 2 crore rupees a day, about 700 crore rupees a year. And a long-term contract of, let us say, 20 years, it comes to 14,000 crores cumulatively. And that is the difference between the going price on that day by the bidding and the price at which your government agreed to purchase power. When you have 14,000 crore differential, that about 10% of the money is changed hands, why are we surprised?
Right.
That is the way India operates. Therefore, our duty is now to address the systemic problem.
Right. So, in our democratic polity, why is there a strong feeling, it has always been there, that the ruling parties, the government machinery is favoring a few big corporates? I'll show you an image that has caught our attention. It's a cartoon created in one of the national dailies.
Got it.
Why is there a strong feeling like that, sir?
No, it's a catch-22 situation. Chicken and egg. Unquestionably, many of the fortunes in the license permit Raj were founded on manipulating the license and permits and quotas. The favored ones got a monopoly. They became the favored ones by paying a bribe. You manipulated the taxes and duties. For instance, import duties, customs duties. For instance, excise duties. You manipulated them to favor certain groups at a point of time. They had prior knowledge. And therefore, they benefited immensely with the patronage of the state. That is very well known. And that's how many of these fortunes were founded. We all know that Adani is of Reliance, very well known about. There is a lot of literature on that. Indian Express ran campaigns after campaign. Mr. Arun Shourie was the editor at the time of Indian Express in those days. And I'm sure in case of the Ambanis, that's pretty much accurate too. Tata's may be slightly different. But post 1991, once you had the advantage of the capital and you're already in the big industrial houses, obviously you have the ability to raise capital. You also have the ability to execute projects.
Right.
Therefore, they are the ones who got the advantage now. Now, the problem for Indian system is, on the one hand, if you now suddenly kill a big industrial groups and grounds of corruption. After all, it is the political system that is sustaining itself on corruption.
Right.
That is rent seeking. And therefore, to punish the entrepreneurs for doing what they were compelled to do would not really be helpful to politics. But more important from the country's point of view, as long as these people are investing money in the long-term growth of India, betting on India's future, investing mostly in infrastructure, where the returns are very limited, 2-3%, and long-term returns, there's no immediate return. That means they're betting on India's future. If you now kill the capital formation in areas where India desperately needs the capital, infrastructure requires probably $1 trillion in India. Tata's, Ambani's, and Adani's together are believed to be willing to invest about $250 to $300 billion right now, the projects. India needs it. So can you afford to cut the nose to spite the face? So we're trapped in a vicious cycle. It's a catch-22. If you try to stop them now and take the anti-corruption things literally very seriously, and therefore deny yourself that investment, India will suffer. If you don't take action, India will suffer in two ways. The first is already some rating agencies downgraded Adani. And some investors like Total Energy, the French company,
Right.
they said in future we will not invest until this is cleared. So already investment climate is becoming adverse to India by not acting. And two, as a country, one day we have to mature as a democracy. You cannot go on depending on illegitimate money and vote buying to run your democracy. All parties are telling on that. This is not a BJP issue or a Congress issue.
Right.
All major political parties are now founded in corruption. All of them are distributing money. In fact, it's the same people who are getting elected, right? Whether it's Congress or BJP or some other party, it's the same stock of people. One day they're in this party, next day they're in another party. So it's not about which party is corrupt, which party is not corrupt. They're all founded in corruption right now because the electoral system is founded in corruption.
Right.
Now, how do you come out of it? How do you change the electoral system? How do you make people realize that the vote is more valuable than the money that is offered? How do you decentralize power and bring a link between the citizens' vote and the consequences? So it requires much deeper political reform. So unless we do both these things, A, to protect India's economy and therefore ensure investment from the rest of the world by conforming to global norms, and B, to look at the long-term Indian politics and reform the Indian polity, we are going to be in trouble. So how do you sequence it? That is a great challenge today before the political system. Instead of blaming each other, we have to honestly address the challenge. We must not pretend that there is now a holy cow, there is no any honest party left. Individually, they may be honest. Many people are honest even now individually. In every single party, there are men and women of great public spirit in the country even today. I have no doubt about it. But the fact is, to get elected, you have to now spend illegitimate money, unaccounted money on a very large scale.
So, sir, would you say that businesses are a victim of the political electoral system? Is it merely that?
In the license Raj, they were the beneficiaries of the system.
Okay.
In the post-1991 world, increasingly they are victims because even if they want to compete, we don't allow fair competition in most cases. Take 2G spectrum.
Right.
It was given to favored ones, obviously by taking bribes, though it cannot be proved, but everybody understands. There's not a single fellow convicted in the 2G spectrum case, despite all the agitation in the country, India against corruption and so on and so forth. Only good thing that happened was when Loksatta went to the court along with eminent citizens of India, asked them to cancel the 122 licenses and order competitive bidding henceforth in allocation of spectrum and other natural resources. At least in spectrum, now I can say with confidence, there is no corruption any further. But one door is closed. Just because supply is closed, as long as the demand remains very strong, it doesn't mean corruption will end. It will only take another form.
Right.
Because the demand comes from the political party's compulsion to raise illegitimate resources on a large scale. There is an electoral system challenge and political culture challenge. As long as the demand continues unabated, the supply may stop here, but it will come in some other form. That's what we are witnessing now.
Right.
So we have to now address this challenge politically. We also have to address this challenge economically. Because even from a narrow standpoint of raising investment for India's infrastructure and growth, unless we conform to certain norms, as I said before, we'll be in trouble. So I think we must honestly convert this crisis into an opportunity.
Right.
This is a crisis, of sorts. We must take it as an opportunity. Instead of pretending it does not exist, let us honestly introspect and tell the country and the world. Because every democracy has its flaws. We are at a stage of democracy where we have to now go to next phase. America had its Tammany Hall politics, machine politics, its monumental corruption and clientelism. Britain had its corruption in 19th century. So we are now going through that phase. That politics is founded on corruption. But we have to move towards the next phase, both for economic gain of India and for the political transformation of India.
So we'll come back to the demand side and the way out in some time. But you talked about that India is going through a corruption phase. But if you look at the phase from a zoomed out view, 25 years ago, we used to hear about corruption numbers being 400, 500 crores. But now we witness 5,000, 6,000 crores, 10,000 crores. So how long is this phase going to be? Is there an end to this?
I hope there will be, but as of now, we don't see it yet. For instance, there was a time when I used to say 1 crore is the expenditure in Andhra Pradesh. 25 years ago, 1 crore per assembly segment, a candidate of major party. In the rest of the country, people used to be somewhat skeptical about that number. My God, 1 crore rupees? No, it's exaggerating. Today, if I say it's 15 or 20 crores, everybody says you're understating it.
Right.
The average is probably 30 crores in Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, and Tamil Nadu per candidate of a major party, per assembly segment. In some elections, it goes up to 50 to 100 crores. Outrageous, insane. In some by-elections, like Munugodu in Telangana, just a few months before the general election, amazingly, something like 300 crores plus was spent by the major parties' candidates. One by-election which has no political significance in terms of changing the government or policy. That money is more than the total expenditure incurred by the major parties and all the candidates put together in British parliamentary election. I made an extraordinary statement, and we have normalized it. Spending 300-400 crores in a by-election, I'm not saying every by-election you are spending that kind of money, but even if one by-election is costing that much money for an assembly segment, if alarm bells do not ring, if we do not seriously look at it, then we are in grave danger. The costs have escalated dramatically, partly because of inflation, partly because of competitive bidding process in elections. Each party, each candidate tries to outbid the other. In a first-past-the-post system, and the parties invested so much of time, energy, passion, and organization into winning an election. One more vote means you win, one less vote means you lose. Therefore, there is this competition. They don't want to spend money. They have no choice but to spend money. Not that spending more money guarantees victory, but not spending money guarantees defeat. Therefore, they're in this race. You ask any MLA or a candidate who contested for assembly in these states, privately they all tell you their sorry stories. How much they're forced to spend, how it's so difficult. And even though there are men and women in politics who are actually honest, personal. And yet if they seek position of office, they have no choice but to somehow raise the money by hook or crook and spend that money. So we're in a dangerous trap right now. And apart from inflation, the insane competition for political office has grown to a level where it's not sustainable. But I've been saying this for long, it's not sustainable. But so far it's still sustained. I don't know when the end will come, but obviously you can't go forever on this scale. Something has to break.
So from what you're saying, election expenditure, the cost incurred during election is the root of the problem. But you also say that election is a competition of ideas. Where is this gap coming, sir? We believe that
election should be a competition of ideas.
Okay.
Election is not a competition of ideas in the most part in the country. I'm not saying it's zero.
Right.
Certainly there are some significant differences between parties, but in the most part, the differences are exaggerated.
Right.
And in any case, 90% of the candidates contesting, they could have been in party A on one day, party B on another day with equal ease. You just look around any state in the country. Look around at 5 or 10-year framework. The people who are with, let's say, Congress are now with BJP. People with BJP are in Congress, with TRS, BRS are in Congress, or TDP. They're interchangeable. We are somehow the media and some of the intellectual elites are thinking that there's a grand fight going on ideology in India. In the large part, the fight is for individual power. and parties' power. And the MLA candidates are instruments. Their clout, their money power, their organization, name recognition, family, and caste. They all become the valuable assets. It doesn't matter which party they are in. Parties are agnostic about it. The candidates are agnostic about it. Only we get exercised about the so-called ideology and parties. They don't care. That's the kind of politics we have created. Somehow there is this rat race to be recognized, to be in a position, without even knowing what it's about. In some cases, they don't even know what it's about. I have known people who say, when you ask them, why are you spending so much money you can't even afford? They say, sir, it's insanity. So they've become trapped in a vicious cycle of insanity. It's not that politician is a crook or something. It's just that everybody is trapped in it.
Is it a psychological trap?
In part, yes. I think somehow in India, the quest for a position and recognition is much greater than almost anywhere else in the world, in democratic world. I remember my first visit abroad was some 32 or 33 years ago to the Netherlands. I visited the Rabobank Netherlands, a very, very prestigious and very powerful cooperative credit bank in the Netherlands. At that time, that bank had bigger deposit base than all the scheduled banks of India put together. Today, of course, it's no longer true because India has grown considerably. And yet, there was no clamor for offices in the bank. To be bank president at the local level or at the national level, there was no clamor. You have to persuade the finest people to take that position. People would say, no, I'm too busy. I have to take care of my family. I want to retire. I have to focus on my business or something. And people would persuade, look, you are the best person for the job. We'll also help you. Please take this, accept this. At the Apex Bank level, a bank which was bigger than all of India's banks put together at that time, there were 24 or so members of the governing board at that time. And because of the stature of that bank, they were all very powerful people in the national politics. 23 of them belonged to the then ruling coalition in the country. One of them belonged to opposition. When there was a vacancy of the chairmanship, the 24 together elected the lone opposition man unanimously. I was stunned. It was a culture shock to me. Here, if your party does not get enough numbers, you abduct the other fellows, you buy the other fellows, there are camps conducted. It's very common.
Right.
We all know. Even at legislative level, assembly, that keeps happening. Cooperative banks and other things, it's common. That's very Indian. And there, 23 people of one political persuasion elected the 24th man of opposite political persuasion unanimously. I was stunned. When I asked them, they said, look, in politics and ideology, we will never compromise. But in running the bank, he is the best person. He understands money, he understands the future, he understands what is happening in the credit sector, and therefore our interests are safe in his hands. It was shocking to me. Whereas in India, with no money in these cooperatives, for instance, you have people lined up like in general election, some bogus membership enrolled, you pay 10 or 11 rupees and you become a member, you don't have any stakes at all, but you come there. 100, 150 rupees was paid in those days for you to vote on behalf of X or Y or Z. So somehow in India, without even understanding what it's about, there is this psychological insecurity which makes people crave for positions without any role or say. So we also have to come out of that. There is a deep-seated problem. Let us face it honestly. I am very proud of our country. I am proud of our democracy, that we sustained our democracy, that the peaceful transfer of power, elections, whatever happens behind the scenes, money and other things, the voting is very proper, counting is very honest, and we declare the result and people by and large accept the result. And we retain elements of liberty in large part. There's genuine political competition. I'm very proud of that. But if we don't also look at the what's, the challenges of politics, we pretend everything is okay, ultimately it will undermine economy. This is a classic case. Adani case is a classic case where you cannot sustain 21st century economics with 19th century politics. Politics has to move. You cannot continue this vote buying politics and then expect that somehow economy will be autonomous of that.
Right. So talking about behind the scenes in an election, choice of candidates put up by the political parties, we can see that the choice of candidates are dependent on 3-4 characters, like the caste that it comes from, the money power, the muscle power. Why is it that
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is money.
Right.
The first question asked of a candidate typically is in 90% cases, how much money can you spend? If the prevailing norm in the state is, let's say, 20, 30 crores as in Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Andhra, Telangana, if you don't spend 25, 30, chances are in 90% cases you're out. Once that is clear, then your pedigree, your caste, then other things come into play.
Irrespective of your political ideology.
Yes. There is no ideology left in most cases. Let's be truthful. 90% of legislators in most states are interchangeable. They could easily contest on behalf of this party or on behalf of that party, depending on where there is space. For instance, there is a strongman in a constituency who already occupied space in one party. The other person does not have space there. He has to move to another party. That's the way it operates. In the most part, I'm not saying it's 100%, but in the most part, that is the truth. So election fights in India, while there is an overarching messaging of some ideology and some philosophy, etc., but in reality, it's about individuals seeking a space under the sun. It's an intense personal struggle for power.
Election expenditure is increasing. So where is that expenditure going towards?
90% in states where expenditure is outrageously high is going for distribution of gifts and money to voters.
Why, sir? Why do the candidates have to give money to voters?
It's not that the people asked for it.
Right.
If you're honest, even in the early days of independence, post 1952 first general election, some amount of money changed hands. The poor people were given in those days 1 to 2 rupees, 5 rupees, big money in those days. But what happened is, two things made distribution of money endemic to our politics. The first is, no matter who is elected, people are not able to see the link between the vote they have given and the consequences to them in their life as a family, as an individual. All these grand things of Bharat Mata, that's all for grandstanding. But the reality is, democracy works when I understand what's happening because of my vote, what's happening with the money I give as taxes. Once I understand it at the personal level, at a local level, then the chances of my using the vote to improve my life is much greater. In the absence of that, in a very highly centralized polity, centralized doesn't mean Delhi, basically it's the state capital, because our elections are state-centric mostly. In a highly centralized polity, the people don't see the vote making a difference to their life at the local level. Therefore, money has become necessary. The second part is, the government failed to do its basic things of service delivery. Supposing your basic amenities, water supply, sewerage, stormwater drainage, local schools, local hospital and healthcare, the people could see the link between the vote and the outcomes there. Then they see, yes, my vote is important in this way, and if I vote wrongly because I take some 50 or 100 rupees money, I may lose out here.
Right.
People lost that confidence. No matter who is elected, even if a good person is elected individually, they're not seeing the outcomes in a measurable manner at the local level, touching their lives. And the grand things, there may be some changes, but they don't touch me. They don't affect my life. So once poor service delivery, unaccountable service delivery, and centralized power, where the decisions and expenditure are not linked to your day-to-day life, these are endemic in a poor country, then money became the currency. And after all, in a poor country, who doesn't want money? If a poor family gets in a state like some of the southern states, excluding Kerala, the poor family probably gets about 10,000 rupees during election season. If there are 3 or 4 votes, if there are 2 major parties fighting for power, if each distributes 1,000 or 2, and it's no longer an outrageous sum, trust me, per vote in the southern states, 2,000 rupees per vote is not at all an outrageous sum. It's a pretty normal sum in most constituencies. So you're looking at 4 votes, 2 parties, 1,000 or 2,000 rupees each. You're looking at 8 to 16,000 rupees in one election alone. If assembly is election separate, equal sum. Local elections, sometimes per capita expenditure is even higher, because local elections fewer votes. So in a poor country, if vote has no other value, people are trying to maximize their short-term gain. So blaming the people is nonsensical. You have to build democracy in a manner that people understand that vote has greater value than this. That there are direct consequences of the vote, not giving moral lectures. In a visible form. I always give the example of this apartment.
Right.
We all pay the monthly maintenance fee here. Now, we know exactly what we expect of this money. I want the lift to be maintained properly. I want the watch and ward to be there. I want the parking space to be properly maintained. I want the water supply to come to my apartment. If any of these things don't happen, I know the pain immediately. I holler, I shout. Because the decision is not made in the state capital or in the secretariat. It's made here. And I know why I'm spending the money. I know what I want in return. Then democracy works. If that is not the case, if a vote is dealing from the consequences, money will be the currency in a poor country. If money everybody is distributing, then short-term immediate gain, and that's why welfare is now gaining in importance in elections. State after state, including Maharashtra recently or Jharkhand, what is happening? Unless people see something tangible coming to their account, all other things government ought to be doing, I don't know whether they do or not, I don't care. How much money am I getting? Whether it's women getting money, whether it's old age pension, whether it is unemployed age, whatever, something tangible, something real, something coming to my account. That's become now common at the cost of the country's long-term growth and the government's basic functions. And that also is equal now increasingly. Every party is now offering to survive. Therefore, caste, religion, sometimes language, emotion in a diverse society. So it's not an accident that money, short-term welfare at the cost of the long-term good. Welfare is necessary, but unsustainable welfare at the cost of the long-term good is a disaster. And the third one, caste and other divisive influences. These are the three primary currencies of politics in India. And any rational person can see this is a very dangerous path unless we address that. And here is a chance where there is a confluence of economics and politics. We now realize that you cannot have autonomous economic growth without some political reform. Let's address it honestly. It will take time. But let's not gloss over that. Let's not pretend there is no problem.
So, speaking of political reform, you said there are systemic flaws in the first past the post system, electoral reform. What is that flaw, sir?
See, one more vote means I win.
Right.
One less vote means I lose. That is what the first past the post system is. What many people don't understand is very few countries have it. Because we're used to the British practice, colonial and post-colonial era, we think this is the universal norm. It's not true. Only United States, Britain, and us now, and subcontinental countries, Pakistan and Bangladesh. These are the only significant countries which are and Canada, which are the first past the post system. Even Australia, the former British colony, has what is called an alternative voting system. New Zealand moves towards a proportionality system. So the only remaining countries are these. Even in Britain, at the regional level, they don't call them states, but no, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, it is by proportionality model. When Britain was part of Europe, European elections in Britain, proportionality model. So what even Britain was giving up progressively, India has held fast. One more vote means you win, one less vote means you lose. So what happens then? Competitive bidding.
Right.
Because how to get that one extra vote? You don't know where that extra vote is. You have to spread the net wide. The second thing that happens in this system is when a democracy has many flaws, and it's bound to have, any country has, America has many flaws. You are seeing what's happening there. You have to have a reformist impulse in politics. There must be a voice for reform in politics which is credible, which is strong. That will happen only when you have a realistic chance of getting elected without being part of the problem. Supposing a relatively small party but wants to reform the country, in a certain way you want to move the needle, you want to reach out to the people, get some support, and your voice therefore is heard, then the voice of reform is kept alive. In the long term, slowly, if the reform argument is valid, it is supported by evidence and logic, then more and more people will embrace that. The country will change. In a first past the post system, what's happening? It's only a fight between two dominant players. A third or fourth player, however strong you are in terms of ideas, have very little chance. Even BJP and Congress, in states where they are marginalized, what are they able to do? Let's say BJP in Kerala. Or Tamil Nadu. BJP and Congress both in Andhra Pradesh on their own. What are they able to do? Nothing. If parties with such pedigree, brand image, resources, leadership are not able to do anything in states where they become third or fourth force, imagine a new voice with a reformist message having any chance. So both ways India is suffering. Reform is stymied. Change that is desperately required, there's not enough of strong voice. It is only the serendipity, either a crisis like 1991, economic crisis that forced us to reform, or the individual whim of a leader. If you are lucky to have a leader who thinks of the future of the country rather than the party or something, maybe once in a while some good may happen. But they're living to serendipity, not to democratic forces. So first past the post system is unsuited to us. It doesn't mean there are easy answers. We have to find a system more suitable to us and then adapt it to our conditions. Because each country is unique. There is no one system which is perfect. Every country is unhappy with its electoral system. So I'm not arguing that one system is inherently superior. In a given context, we have to look at the best way. And the second challenge is, apart from electoral system, centralization of power. Already we discussed it. When power is central, India has the most centralized power in the world. Among democracies, definitely, and even among non-democracies, among all significant countries, our polity is most centralized. Take China, which is an authoritarian country. Local governments in China account for 51% of the expenditure. In India, it's 3%. We call China a dictatorship authoritarian, but China is more responsive to people's wishes and needs than India is because of the way governance is structured. You cannot have such a highly centralized system where democracy works effectively. So our democracy is reduced to vote and shout. We vote with great gusto. There's such a phenomenal campaigns, intense political competition, life or death struggle. For what outcome, God knows. And then protest immediately after the election is over. From next day onwards, Indians are superb at protest. Rasta Roko, Hartal, agitations, mass, it become endemic to our culture. But other elements of democracy are missing. Vote and shout are not enough. I'm not saying it can be reformed overnight, but let's begin the process. Take this as an opportunity.
So what is the alternate electoral system that you're talking about?
For instance, let's look at a slightly different way of defining election success. Supposing the voice in the legislature is in proportion to the votes available to that voice.
Okay.
You are coming up with an idea. Look, we must have fiscal discipline. The government must focus on infrastructure, economic growth, long-term investment, quality education, quality healthcare, and basic amenities. Not merely short-term welfareism. Or a party says, look, government must not be highly centralized. It must be localized as much as possible, local empowerment. Supposing a party says, look, government must not do everything. Government must do it basic things very well. The purpose of government must be very defined. And we must give economic freedom. So there are many ideas in the world. Supposing you get vote in proportion to the people's belief in that. Let's say you were able to persuade 10% people. The 10% people have 10% voice in the assembly or in parliament. Just imagine that. Then what's happening? The incentive for the parties and individual candidates is now altered. Now the incentive is, how do I get one more vote than the other fellow? In the new system, the incentive is, how do I maximize my vote? So there's no defeat there. Even if I get 10% vote, I get 10% voices. I'll live to fight another day. If my argument is sound enough, if I'm able to persuade more and more people, if I'm logical, 10% can become 20%. Whereas today, the 10% voice is dead. But it doesn't mean such a system will automatically be good for us. India is a country of castes, religions, languages, regions. There are so many diversities. Supposing it now accentuates the divisions.
Right.
If each caste becomes a party, that's not what we want.
No.
So how can we tweak this model to suit our requirements? Supposing we have a high threshold, let's say not less than I'm just giving a ballpark number, not less than 10% votes in a major state.
Okay.
It's unlikely that even a major caste will get 10% vote.
Okay.
And if they get 10% vote, already they are significant parties like Vokaligas. Now Devagowda party is Vokaliga party. One year party is PMK in Tamil Nadu. But basically, it will not be any more divisive than today. You will force aggregation. Political parties are about interest aggregation. So can you have a reasonable threshold? The second fear of proportionality model is governments inherently may be unstable. It's unlikely that any party will get 50% vote. Most often they may not get. Coalitions become necessary. Indians want stable governments. Though I don't believe an electoral majority of a party is critical for the country, but if our preference is that, there's no harm. We can get it done. Supposing we give bonus seats to the largest party in a state and or in the country. We give, let's say, 10 or 15% extra seats over and above the percentage of votes. Then the stability point is taken care of. So we can tweak it to suit our needs. But basically, alter the incentive for the candidate and for the political party. In such a system, the political party will not ask you, Ankit, how much money can you spend? They will see, is Ankit popular? Is he respected? Is he going to increase the vote share because of the credibility he enjoys? Not buy the votes because the expenditure incurs. The incentive is altered. We respond to incentives. It's not a moral endeavor. It is incentives. Similarly, the candidate is now seeking to enhance his credibility rather than spread money to get into power. It's the ideas that he espouses and the track record he or she brings to the table that matters. The incentive for the party and the candidate has now changed considerably. And in a proportionality model, for instance, the percentage of voting is always higher because to reflect everybody's views, there are voices available. Always the voting percentage is higher. There is greater political participation. There is also a greater harmony. Generally, the governments in proportionality model, they have honest negotiation and then come together and then adopt the agenda. Politics is less heated, less polarizing. That's one model we can think of. But equally important is how to democratize political parties. Suppose the candidates are chosen by the members of the party in a democratic way. We can design systems for that. And the party leadership itself is democratic. Now, what is the Maharashtra elsewhere? What is the problem? Somebody says, I am the leader. I'm anointed as a leader oftentimes. And therefore, whether I command majority or not within the party, you listen to me, or else you're out. Supposing the choice of the candidate, leadership are genuinely democratic by a process which is transparent and maybe mediated by election commission or somebody, then again, issue is altered. Now it's the whim and fancy of a leader and the money power that gives candidature rather than the acceptability and the credibility of the candidate. So both political party reform, decentralization of power, and electoral system. Each of these has a say. Let's start the process. Let's build a consensus. There's no one perfect model. But we cannot continue as business as usual. You cannot continue with 30 crores in a poor country for an assembly segment or 10-15 crores in some states. Many parts, Northeast, Jammu and Kashmir, many parts of the South, increasingly states like Maharashtra, Uttar Pradesh, etc. Money in politics. You have to change the equation.
So public-spirited candidates, the choice of candidates who are public-spirited, would you say that over the course of Indian history, that number, that proportion of candidates who are genuinely public-spirited and don't rely on money power has been decreasing? And when did that start? When did that have happened?
No. Quality people who want to make a difference, the number never decreases.
Okay.
But the opportunity to actually make a difference through electoral politics, the number is decreasing.
Right.
If you don't want to play the game this way, or if you cannot afford to play the game this way, you can't raise or spend 30 crores, you don't want to do it. Either of these two. People like that are increasingly marginalized. Some people are still contesting, somehow managing to survive. But eventually they are marginalized. They can no longer be parts of the system. Because an honest man, by definition, maybe one time he can raise with friends and others 30 crores or 20 crores or 10 crores. Maybe one time he gets elected. But next time he cannot do that. It's not possible to sustain that unless he becomes corrupt. So either the person becomes part of the game, this whole corruption cycle, political economy of corruption, rent seeking, or if he wants to maintain those standards, he has to take himself out of politics. Increasingly, you see that. Many good people, even now, there are exceptional people in politics in every party. Trust me. It is a cynical view to say that all politicians are bad or corrupt. It's not true. You don't enter politics unless there is a sense of public good. Otherwise, in a growing economy, with the same money you spend, same hard work you put in, same talent you have, you can make plenty of money outside politics. It's wrong to say that people enter politics only to make money. It's one of the mythologies of the country. There's nothing wrong in wanting to make a difference to public good. That's a natural urge for some people. They have leadership qualities. What is wrong with that? Actually, you must encourage that ambition. But if you make sustenance in politics dependent on money power you deploy and the dirty things you do, you have created the wrong incentive. So there are good people, but good people are increasingly marginalized in politics.
So you said politicians privately, if you speak to them, they'll tell you about their ordeal of spending so much money. So if every politician feels the pinch during elections, then why aren't parties looking at a proportionality sort of a model where...
It is like a fish caught in a flow of a river.
Okay.
You can't go against the stream.
Right.
It doesn't work like that. Unless you're willing to take yourself out of politics. If you want to be in politics, individually you're helpless. Sometimes, unfortunately, when the parties and leaders feel they're helpless, that is where the problem is. I don't blame politicians as a class. I genuinely believe, and I always held the view, that politicians are as much victims of a vicious cycle as they're villains. To see them as villains is a very unproductive way of looking at it. But having said that, who has the obligation to change it? It's the political leadership. Because you go to people with seeking a mandate to change the way things are. And once you get the mandate, you actually set out to change things. That is what politics is about. We have forgotten that part. Their politicians are to blame. But not for what is happening today. That there is not enough of an urge to generate a debate, build a consensus, and change the way things are done. They're culpable, but not for what is happening at a point of time. We are all too ready to blame politicians for everything that is wrong. That is wrong. But that politicians, particularly leadership in each party, they don't have the wisdom or the skill or the courage to tell the people, look, we are in a morass. We are in a trap. We must come out of it. And opportunities come. Adani's case is an opportunity. Just as the economic crisis of 1991 was an opportunity to change track. And we took some steps. They helped us as a country. We didn't take enough steps. To that extent, we did not get enough benefit. But certainly, some things are done. Dismantling of license permit quota laws happened in a significant measure. India has benefited from that. So if we don't seize the opportunity, if we just gloss over that, pretend everything is okay, like in some other countries when there's an economic crisis like India had in 91, they took $5-10 billion from IMF or something, managed for the time being. After that, they went back to business as usual. Then you won't change. Take this as an opportunity. Start the process. Not everything will change today. For heaven's sake, acknowledge it. Be truthful. We don't have to be unduly defensive. Every democracy has its problems, and its democracy is a very complex system. It's a fragile system. It's a difficult system. Let's own it up and say we have problems like other countries had problems. 19th century Britain had phenomenal problems. There was an auction going on for MP seats in Britain at that time. Even 20th century America had Tammany Hall politics and machine politics. There was so much of corruption, clientelism. So we need not be ashamed about it. But we should acknowledge it and address it to suit our conditions. That's all my plea.
So to your memory, have we ever come close to discussing a proportionality-based model?
In recent times, Ankit, in the last 20 years, between 1996, remember 1996, National government, the coalition government was defeated. But the alternative clearly did not have much. And there was instability. In 96, there was a government, but with two prime ministers, one after another. Deva Gowda first and then Indra Kumar Gujral. And then the government was brought down by Congress party. Then 1998, Vajpayee government came to power, but could not last. 99, another election. Then from 1999 to 2004, it continued. 2004, quite unexpectedly, Congress came to power along with their allies, but they were still shaky. So between 96 and 2009, those 12-13 years, major parties were in disarray.
Right.
They were thinking hard. And major national parties in particular, particularly Congress, the party which was dominant for such a long time in our history before and after independence, Congress party realized that state after state, their vote percentage is falling below a threshold. 1977 was different. Congress lost, but it was an emotional moment. And then it regained its percentage of vote almost everywhere in the country by 1980. 1989 was different. 89, many social groups, Congress lost. Other forces representing them emerged, particularly in states like UP, Bihar, and many other parts of the country. So that decline was more or less irreversible. If you notice, Congress came down to 17 or 18%, some states in 89. That 17, 18 became eventually 5%. Because in the first past the post system, even if I want to vote for you, once I realize that my vote will not translate into seats, I indulge in tactical voting.
Right.
Therefore, I vote for the two parties which I think are viable. And Congress became a victim of that. Therefore, there was a lot of thinking, what is the alternative? So without going into too many details of what happened, there was serious consideration of that. They were willing. They understood the malaise. And big change happens when the needs of a political party in power and the nation's good, they come together. Rarely do parties do something for the nation's good at their own cost.
Right.
That's a little unrealistic. Sometimes it may happen with extraordinary leaders, and oftentimes they're assassinated or they're thrown out of power. We have seen umpteen number of cases, General Sadat in Egypt, or Menachem, I think the other leader, I forget his name, Rabin, Yitzhak Rabin, or Menachem Begin. One of them was assassinated when he wanted peace. So rarely does it happen when there is no convergence between the party's needs and the nation's good. But unfortunately, at a critical time, certain major parties, in this case communists, while they wanted it, communists were always in favor of proportional representation. They did not have a strategic sense to make this the central issue of their political support to Congress government.
Okay.
Because they didn't want to invest their political capital in this. It was a very wrong decision strategically. And the country paid a heavy price. So there was a moment when this seemed very likely. But once 2009, Congress got a bigger mandate. And 2014 onwards, BJP got a single party majority twice and a significant vote share and seat share now. It's a little more difficult because parties don't look at an option other than the status quo when they're doing well. So I think that was a window which we missed. But now that this is happening, we must think about it. I'm not saying there is a system which is an answer, but I'm saying the current model is detrimental to India's economic future and democratic evolution. That I can say without fear of contradiction. Let's look at options. Decentralization, parties internal democracy, an alternative electoral model with the best features to benefit our polity.
Right. So coming back to the case at hand, time and again we keep hearing about these corruption allegations with different corporates involved. So are our government actions, and there's a lot of media attention given, there's a lot of things done, maybe some laws brought in, government action is there, bureaucracy gets all active and everything. But does it not feel like we are going on a case-to-case basis and...
It's all ad hoc and political.
Right.
See, I remember vividly Mrs. Indira Gandhi, 1971, her election, I was 15 years old. Didn't know much about politics, but we knew Garibi Hatao, who wouldn't want the slogan. As a youngster from a village, the idea of equality was a fantastic one, very exciting one. By 73, 74, the scales have fallen. We realized that the reality is different from the articulation. Corruption, poverty, and unemployment. These three became the big issues in people's minds. But the elites responded very sadly in a negative way. Emergency was imposed. At that time, what did we think, my generation? Indira Gandhi is the enemy. If she goes, India will prosper. I genuinely believe that. In 77, we thought if only Congress was defeated, Indira Gandhi was defeated, India would be fantastic. That happened. India did not become fantastic. We continue with this obsession. Bofors came, 87. I remember I used to entry to know, I was to plead with my officials and staff and district magistrate about integrity and values in public life. Apart from enforcing the standards, I also used to try and reach out to them. One day, an executive engineer said, after 87, after Bofor's broke out, sir, you are giving us so many lectures and trying to maintain certain level of probity. If the Prime Minister is accused of taking money, what is it you're talking about? After that, I stopped giving lectures. Did whatever I could to enforce probity, but no, my credibility is lost as a governing system. And we made Bofors into a political issue. Rajiv Gandhi versus somebody else, Congress or somebody else, and somebody got the political benefit, but didn't really address the challenge. We pretend as if it's an individual case of morality. Then came the India against corruption, the whole 2G spectrum scandal and so on and so forth. Instead of a creative response to address the systemic challenge, we made it, this government is corrupt and we'll bring down the government. Of course, that government was brought down. While individual integrity is maintained, I have no doubt about Mr. Narendra Modi's individual integrity. Almost anybody, even his worst opponents, will not say that he is individually corrupt. His life is an open book that way. But systemically, that these things happen, that parties, all parties, in power or opposition, were indulging in practices which are not right. And democracy, therefore, is subverted, is a truth. Nobody can deny it. So each time we are politicizing it in a party political way, for temporary partisan gain. And even the institutions in the country, non-political institutions, are not acting very rationally. I remember vividly, there was a case of Mr. Gopinath Munde, the former Deputy Chief Minister of Maharashtra, later Union Minister. He made a public statement in Maharashtra, in Mumbai, in a meeting, saying that, look, election cost is going up. Most of it is unethical and illegitimate. I had to spend 8 crores for the Loksatta election, which actually is a very small amount for Andhra and Telangana guys.
Right.
They feel insulted if you say only 8 crores was spent by an MP candidate. So 8 crores, Maharashtra is a better state, at least at that time it was. You know what the election commission did? To their eternal shame? Instead of using it as an opportunity to generate a debate about expenditure in elections and what needs to be done, they gave a notice to Mr. Munde saying that you spent more than the ceiling. Tell us why we should not take action against you. What would Mr. Munde do? He said, no, I misspoke, or no, it was misrepresented, etc., etc. I rang up the Chief Election Commissioner and really shouted at him. What is it you're doing? You know very well. We all know very well. If you have any understanding of politics in India, we all know 8 crores is nothing in some states. We're pretending as if it's not there, if some individual has done something wrong and therefore I'm acting. There's a systemic problem. If you have lung power, if you have institutional power, use it to raise the debate and then find an answer. Don't pretend everything is solved by giving a notice to somebody. So this ostrich-like approach, this unwillingness to confront the reality and converting everything into a partisan political debate for electoral advantage in the short term, that's what's been happening so far. It's not a wise approach. Let's wake up, grow up, become mature and honest.
So a couple of months back, electoral bonds was in the news. One of the things that the Supreme Court did was it mandated the revealing of the donors list. It gave a list, and if you have a quick look at it, you will notice that the maximum money donated towards electoral bonds has gone towards the ruling party, whichever state or union it may be. Is it normal for any democracy?
It's not.
Okay.
It's not normal for any democracy because in other democracies, at least Europe and United States, etc., and Canada or Australia, they've reached a level of maturity where the economic fortunes of an enterprise, an individual, do not depend on political vagaries.
Okay.
Elon Musk supported Donald Trump very publicly. Supposing Kamala Harris won, not Donald Trump, almost nothing would have happened adverse to Elon Musk's interests. Many other entrepreneurs in America supported Democratic Party. Now Trump is elected. You can be reasonably confident, even with Trump's somewhat intemperate style, almost nothing serious will happen to undermine the economic fortunes of these enterprises that support the Democratic Party. That means the individual liberty and their political preferences don't make a difference to their economic future. In India, we are not there. Despite liberalization up to a point, still in many businesses, your economic future, your business enterprise's profitability and survival depends on government's patronage because we don't really have genuine rule of law in India. Normatively, it is there. But we still have arbitrariness in decision making. We still don't have genuine competition and economic choice in this country. Therefore, the other element that we have to now buttress is, can we build rule of law to a level where economic fortunes depend on competition and choice of consumers? Competition between the providers and choice of consumers, not government's patronage. We are a long way off. And therefore, it is but natural, whether it is publicly disclosed or not disclosed, money will flow to whoever has the power of decision making, or whoever has the nuisance value to create a problem for you. Opposition also gets, but obviously those in power and those who are likely to retain power will get much more. If opposition has a chance of getting into power, they'll also get significant amounts. It depends on the political perception. That's what's happening in India. Whether it happens very transparently by check, unfortunately, that law was created way back in 2003.
Right.
I was very much a part of that process after Tehelka scam. I pleaded for this law, and Congress and BJP came together, and unanimously the parliament enacted that law. But the law did not work the way it was intended, because transparent by check contribution, many people were not willing even when the option was given, because they were afraid of the harassment from the other party. And if they came to power, what would happen? For all these reasons, it didn't work. Therefore, they went back to collecting cash. The response of Mr. Arun Jaitley was a legalistic one. How do I make transparent collection and transparent expenditure, but giving anonymity to the donor so that they don't face the consequences? It's a legalistic approach, nitpicking approach, but to a genuine problem. The response was to a genuine problem. Now we removed that secrecy, quite rightly so. It doesn't mean we have done anything good, because now even the little that is officially collected will go underground as cash. I'm pretty certain, look at the next 3-4 years compared to earlier years, much less money will flow officially into the party's coffers, but it doesn't mean that they don't get more money. They get actually more money. As you said, money, the quantity keeps increasing, not decreasing, but more of it will go underground. So that's not a solution. We have to search for solutions honestly.
So my last question to you for today, for this discussion would be that looks like corruption is endemic in our country because of systemic flaw, and looks like it is a mess. Where do we start?
There's no single answer. Corruption is like cancer. So to say that this is the answer to the cancer is ridiculous, right? Each form of cancer is a separate answer.
Absolutely.
Some cancers are very slow growing, like prostate cancer. At the age of 85, they say 85% of men have prostate cancer. Most of it is slow growing and they die of old age and not cancer. Just to give an example. Similarly, cancer of the lungs is different. Cancer of breast is different. Cancer of cervix, now we know it's because of an infection called human papillomavirus. Therefore, vaccine actually helps if you take it early on in life. So, while cancer is a generic expression, each cancer requires to be treated in a different manner.
Absolutely.
Corruption also is similar. Some forms of corruption is because you created artificial scarcity. Some forms because there is no competition and choice. Some forms because of the government's licensing regulations. Some forms because of the government procurement processes. So there are certain principles, and wherever you applied them, you see the corruption has come down. For instance, railway reservations. Corruption has dramatically come down the moment you computerized it, well before the computer era. Way back in late 70s and 80s, we started computerization of railway reservation. Much of the corruption has come down. Just because transparency is there, you know exactly what your wait list is, and therefore the bakshis you have to pass on to the ticket examiner, somebody to get a berth, has substantially come down. I'm not saying it becomes zero, but substantially come down by transparency and technology. The moment earlier telephones, getting a connection, or even after getting the sanction, getting the fellow install the telephone or to repair it without a bakshis, nothing would happen. The moment you brought in competition and choice, everybody has a telephone now. Can anybody say that I had to pay a bribe to get a telephone? They are coming and begging you to take a telephone.
Absolutely.
So human beings have not become more moral. The way things are done has changed.
Right.
Incentives are altered. So the basic principles are transparency and technology, competition and choice. Wherever possible, remove government monopoly and allow competition and multiple players and choices. And then in contracting and tendering, make sure that the processes are not amenable to manipulation. Even when there is so-called e-tendering, etc., manipulation is still happening oftentimes. Supposing you make it without manipulation and promote competitive bidding, 2G spectrum. I can say with complete confidence, post 2G spectrum scandal, once the Supreme Court gave a direction on our petition that there must be a competitive bidding process in a transparent manner, there is zero corruption now in 2G spectrum allocation. So that kind of a competitive procurement process which is transparent. And then, despite all these things, there will be some corruption. There will be always some people who are intrepid, who are not afraid until they are punished, and therefore very quick, very effective prosecution mechanism which is independent, which is impartial, which is effective, and including confiscation of all the properties. If somebody is found corrupt, you can't say merely the money you collected as a bribe will be taken away from you. The real fear in a country like India is all my property will go. Years ago, there was a couple called Kiran Sharma and Arun Sharma in the United States, doctors. They defrauded the American healthcare system. You know what the federal court did? All their properties, they were jailed for 15, 16 years, but all their properties, their cash, their stock, their jewelry, their homes, they were all confiscated, gone. And make it happen. And finally, address political corruption, because if the demand side goes unchecked, if the rapacious demand for money in politics continues to grow, you close one avenue, another avenue opens up. Therefore, eliminate that demand. Create a rational system with transparent funding. Alter the incentives. There is common sense. There is no panacea. There is no mantra. All this is common sense based on our own experience. Wherever you've done the right things, corruption has come down in areas. It's not true to say corruption is increasing everywhere. There are many, many areas where corruption has come down. There are some areas where corruption is continuing or growing. Rest of the world, very corrupt earlier, corruption has come down. Some areas, corruption is still continuing. There are plenty of lessons on offer. Be objective, be logical, go by evidence, go by best practices, understand your own culture, your own history, adapt the practices. Right. Corruption, the moment you see it as a moral issue, everybody is bad, everybody is corrupt, immoral, you don't solve the problem. Corruption is largely an incentives issue. Corruption is about the way the system is designed. Government's role is not to preach morality. Government's role is to alter incentives. We are very ready to preach morality. We are very unwilling to actually alter the incentives, the way the system functions. We have to become rational actors.
Right. Thank you for sharing your perspectives today, sir. Thank you.